Thank you all for having us here today to speak to you at your rounds on the Northern realities in Northern health. And we have sort of a process that we tend to follow with our presentation. So we're going to start with introducing ourselves and doing our own territorial acknowledgement. And so I'm just going to turn it over to my colleague Ryan to start us off.
Sure. So, hi, everyone. Thanks for coming today. My name is Ryan Dirnback. I'm Métis and Austrian ancestry. I live on the traditional territory of today in Prince George. My background, nurse, and I completed my grad studies in health administration 7 years ago.
Sorry, Ryan, it's hard to hear you. You're kind of fading in and out.
Is that better, Jaylene?
Yep, that's a little bit better, yep.
Okay, perfect. Well, I'll start over. My name is Ryan Dirnback. I'm the Northern Interior Lead for Community Engagement and Education with the Indigenous Health Team. My ancestry is Métis on my mother's side and Austrian on my father's side. I live on the traditional territory of the Lake-Tenay in Prince George. My background is nursing. Since then, I've completed my grad studies in health administration, finished about 7 years ago. And since then, I've worked with First Nations Health Authority, supporting practice and programs in the 55 nations in the north, and then moving over to Northern Health as well. Since coming back to Northern Health, I've been with the Indigenous Health Team and the Prince George Community Services Team, both in service to Indigenous people in the north, and also spent a significant amount of time redeployed to COVID-19 response work, leading and supporting the mass clinics in the Prince George area. Over to you, Donna.
Thanks, Ryan. So my name is Donna Porter, and I respectfully acknowledge that I'm speaking to you all here today from the unceded and ancestral lands of the Lheidli people, and also just to acknowledge that this is also the home of the Prince George Chartered Métis community. I myself am Métis, and I'm a citizen of the Métis Nation of British Columbia. My family originates from the Red River settlement in Manitoba, and we are descendants of the Saulteaux Ojibwe peoples. I am a registered nurse, and I have a master's degree in leadership with a health focus. I have held various operational positions in my career as well as educational positions. I have recently come to Indigenous Health and Northern Health from Northern Health Nursing Professional Practice Department, in which I was a nursing professional practice lead for 3 years. I've been with Northern Health for 6 years now, and my current role is the lead for cultural safety and anti-Indigenous racism education, as Jaylene had mentioned earlier. Thank you. I'll just turn it back to Ryan.
Seems like people are having trouble hearing me. Is this better?
Yeah, that sounds better. Candace, can you hear Ryan now?
No, I can't hear you very well, Ryan.
Okay. Donna, I'm going to turn it over to you. I'll try to sort out my audio here.
Can you just change the slide? Good. Okay, so for Ryan and I, we both just want to note that we have nothing to disclose from the presenter disclosure request. Great. And then we just wanted to start out by I apologize for the blurriness of this slide, not sure what's going on there, but we just wanted to introduce you to the Indigenous Health team and just familiarize you a little bit with the team members. For many of you, if you have worked with the Indigenous Health team in the past, the team has changed a lot in the last year, and it's pretty much a pretty new team with lots of new positions in place. I'm just going to start with Nicole Cross, who is our new Vice President for Indigenous Health. And she took over from Margot Greenwood, who was with the organization for 8 years. And Margot has since retired. And Nicole started with us April 1st. And we also have Dr. Roseanne Larstone. And Roseanne came to her position last fall in August and is the Regional Director for Indigenous Health. We also have Taylor Turgeon, who's our lead for community engagement and knowledge broker. And currently, Taylor is actually on her maternity leave. She just had a beautiful baby girl not too long ago, so she'll be back with us next year. Her position is not currently filled. And then there's myself and Ryan, he's introduced himself. We also have Christine, who's our executive assistant to our VP and our director. And Christine Lewis is new with us as well. Some of you may have recognized her name. She used to be, I believe, with Workplace Health and Safety. So for the 3 new leads for Indigenous community engagement and education, there's Ryan, as he's introduced himself. We have Connie Cunningham, who is in the Northeast region of Northern Health. And we also have Tracy Downey, who is in the Northwest region, and she's located in Prince Rupert. Connie's in Fort St. John. So I work closely with the 3 of them, and we have now become the new education team within Indigenous Health, and much more of a front-facing team. So doing presentations like this in regards to cultural safety and anti-Indigenous racism education presentations is becoming much more of a common process for us. And I think that most of you know, I mean, our work is really embedded a lot in regards to the recommendations that have come out of the In Plain Sight report that everyone is aware of. That certainly highlighted the racism that exists in the BC health system. So that is our roles. We have new positions that are currently in the process of also being filled. There will be a lead to support the Indigenous patient liaisons within each of the facilities, and also the Indigenous Health Improvement Committees. And we also have 2 more positions that will be focused specifically on the Indigenous concerns process. And I think with that, I'll turn it back over to Ryan. Were you able to get your audio working?
I think I fixed it. I changed a
Sounds-
bunch of settings on my end, so I see some nodding. People can hear me. Great. So let's ground ourselves in what we'll actually be covering today. So what will you walk away from this session with? So by the end of this session, you'll be able to have an understanding of key reality considerations, such as population, such as geography, such as language, related to providing care for Indigenous people in Northern BC, and then articulate that importance to practice. We will hold time for questions at the end. Thoughts, some aha moments maybe. And the intent here, like I think Donna mentioned, was to really bring it out of the abstract and really ground it into practice. So really hoping that throughout the session, you're thinking of, those people that you might have seen from these rural and remote areas and how you might engage with them differently, treat their care a little bit different. I do want to highlight a limitation here. We're not really able to speak fully about the realities of living remotely. That's a truth that the people that live remotely hold. So this isn't exhaustive, it's very much just a primer to get you thinking about what these realities might mean in the context of the care that you provide. Back over to you, Donna.
Thanks, Ryan. So we just need to talk a little about who exactly are the Indigenous people in Canada. And the Indigenous people in Canada are the First Nations people, the Inuit, and the Métis, and they are the recognized Aboriginal groups within Canada and the Canadian Constitution. Each of these nations consist of very distinct right-bearing communities with their own histories and their own relations with the Crown. Within our work, we do not teach culture. But what it is important to note is that although many of the Indigenous nations may hold similar worldviews, from nation to nation, there are differences. And it is really important not to pan-Indigenicize the Indigenous people and to understand that they are different and they are distinct from each other. And it's important in our learning journeys to understand who these distinct people are that we serve in Northern Health.
We're going to start to think about these populations and groups that we serve by considering a few questions. So these tie pretty closely to the learning objective for today. So encourage you to add your thoughts to the chat. And it's okay if you don't know. We all started at different places with our understanding of the people that we serve in this northern region. And you know, that's important to note. But this kind of thinking will help ground us in this northern context as we move through the presentation. So just a few questions, you know, really think about these. How many First Nations communities and Métis chartered communities are there in the north? Where are they? How many languages are spoken? Do you know any of the languages? Do you know any greetings in the languages? Have you ever used them with the patients? So start thinking about those sorts of things. As we move through this presentation, we'll share some resources and some thinking and some good work that's been happening in this way.
So we also want to share with you so just some facts, and these are things that have come out of the is from the 2016 census actually. And again, I think this slide might be just a little bit blurry. I'm hoping everyone can see it okay. But just to give you some idea of provincially and regionally, the population of Indigenous people in BC. So in BC, there's, as you can see, 270,585 Indigenous people. 172,000 plus are First Nations, 89,000 plus are the Métis, and 1,600 plus are the Inuit. And what's important to note is regionally for Northern Health, that Northern Health serves close to 300,000 people, and 32% of that are Indigenous people. So I think that's an important thing for everyone to be aware of. And when we're talking about the Indigenous people more specifically, and to break it down, you're talking about 85% are First Nations, and that 59% of them live off reserve, and actually only 26% live on reserve. There's 13% of Métis people living in the Northern Health region, and there's also 0.2%, which are the Inuit people that also live in the BC Northern region. Our area consists of 55 First Nations with 11 Métis chartered communities, and there are 17 distinct languages.
We have a few good resources here. Just jot these down. If you're sitting at a desk, you have a scrap sheet of paper nearby, jot these down and look them up. We can put them in the chat. But some of these resources are probably the richest resources that I've used to further my understanding of the region that we serve. So I'll just pause the share and I'll transition over to a web browser here. We'll just explore a couple of them. This first one here, this is actually housed on the Northern Health Indigenous Health website. So I encourage you to go look this up. But what this does, this lists the facilities that Northern Health has in the relation to residential schools and day schools. Because it's really important to understand that a lot of these places, they ran in our backyards. And we will serve people every day that come with these histories. It's really important to keep in mind as we're working with these people and these families. And then the second one, the second resource here I want to share is from Métis Nation BC. So Donna was just talking about the Métis people in that last slide. This one shows where the Métis chartered communities are in relation to northern BC. And so we'll scroll down and you're able to see a map of BC. Again, it's tough to show in any detail here, but you see throughout the north, there's a number of Métis chartered communities, and we work right alongside them and their leadership as well in our work. And lastly here, this one is probably the richest resource that I've really used to further my understanding in my practice related to that understanding of where are people in the north? Where are they from? What are the languages? What are those cultural elements that are important to understand? So what this one is, this is a First Peoples map of BC. So if you have a notepad there, just jot that down and look into this a little bit more, maybe some point this week or some point in the next couple of weeks. What this is, this shows the territories and the communities in our area, and I've kind of focused it to the northern region here. And so you can actually go through and explore a lot of detail about these communities and learn more about them. So, say you have a patient in front of you and they say, I'm from Takwa. It's important to know where that is. And yeah, Candace will send out these resources. So it's important to know, say, where these communities are for a number of different reasons. And we'll get into those later in the conversation, but I just want to show you all of the rich information that this map has. So let's go in, we're about right here in Prince George. So let's go in and explore Nacasli. Nacasli is near Fort St. James on the south end of Stewart Lake. It's about an hour and a half from here, and it's definitely rural. I wouldn't consider it remote. I've been there a number of times myself, but if you go into it, you just zoom right in. And here you can see Nacasli. So if you click on it, there's a number of really rich resources and information that's presented now. So we can go in, and for each community, they have a pronunciation. So if you're in the area or you're in a meeting and you want to acknowledge the territory, it's a really good resource to learn how to pronounce it. I know myself, I've reached out to nations specifically to ask how to pronounce because I want to recognize their territory. And so if you click on this button here, it'll tell you how to pronounce it. And then you can go down, you can explore the language. So the language is Dakal. Number of really rich resources here. So we'll talk later about greetings and the power of greetings as we use them in our facilities. I know it's a lesson that one of the elders shared with me, and it's been enlightening. We'll talk about that a little later. So now you kind of know where you can go to learn a greeting, and there's a pronunciation there. You can see a population, you can see number of fluent speakers, really, really rich information here. I really encourage you to look into that a little bit more when you have some time. And so I'll pause the share and I'll move back to our presentation now. So now you should be able to see the presentation again. If I can just get a thumbs up from somebody. Right on. Awesome. Thank you so much. So now we're going to get into care considerations. So one of my favorite questions as we explore this type of information is, so what? What does it all mean? So here's where we start tying it into practice. So understanding vast geographies and their realities will have direct implications to the care that you provide. Again, as we noted at the outset of the presentation, these aren't exhaustive, but they'll definitely get you thinking. If you think of examples, definitely share these in the chat, or we're a small group, even come off of mute. That would probably be very powerful for the group to hear. So, different things I assume you're involved with on a daily basis. So booking appointments, considering where the person is from and the geography and the challenges has direct implications to booking appointments, for example, similarly to follow-up. So it's a lot of communities in the north that are on that map. People can't get out on a regular basis like we're used to. A lot of places are fly in and fly out only. So be prepared for those appointments to change given the weather. And then how do you respond to that in a really good way? So that person feels really supported by you and your team to attend that appointment and get that really important care that you provide to them. Similarly, if you work in a hospital system, so how does geography actually frame the steps that you would take to plan something like discharge planning? Checking where they're from, you can use that map I shared. It'll have really important implications. So for example, are they from a remote community or are they from a city or a more rural area? If they're from a remote area, really consider what that geography means. Like, how will they get prescriptions? How will they get wound care supplies? Someone with a complex wound might be working with that for months and months. And it's really important to support them to ensure that they can get what they need. And geography plays a big, big part of that. Another one, I've had direct work with in this area. So are there health providers in their Indigenous communities that can support the care after the person leaves the walls of our facilities? Some do offer IV therapy, for example. Some do offer wound care. How will you ensure continuity of care by engaging their local team? And in most cases, if they're able to, people would prefer to be in community, but it's that legwork that we can do on the front end to really investigate what supports are in their Indigenous communities and really build that connection between our teams and those teams. And then, of course, beyond these logistical and care consideration conversations, social considerations. As we work with people from all over the North, don't assume that dynamics are the same for every community and every nation. It takes a lot of energy to really learn what the realities and what the preferences are for people from different areas all over the North. Even just ensuring you're asking if the patient has a support person that they want involved in their care. Some cultures, that person is a specific individual in their family. It's important for us to know that and involve that person in the care as if they were the patient themselves. Cultural considerations. So this one is really interesting. And are there practices that they want to have involved in their care? Ask people this. It's okay to ask. And just reflecting on the fact that each one of us on this call, no matter your role, like Donna or I or Candace, or the physicians on the call, I just want to remind us, we each hold incredible power in the organizations that we work within and the teams that we work within to make these changes. So really encourage you, hold space in your processes, in your teams, and even in your physical space to ensure that people could perform ceremony or healing practices. Our each individual power and positions in this organization and other conversations can make a lot of difference in people when it comes to really reinforcing this need for people to be able to practice these cultural considerations as if any other Western model of care. And then language considerations. Are there supports related to language that you could consider including? Who are those people that could support you with that, such as the Indigenous patient liaisons that Donna talked about earlier? And if you have any thoughts around any of this, definitely share it in the chat. I think experiences and insight from this group would be really powerful, and we can hold some time at the end to reflect on those as well.
Thanks, Ryan. That's great. Great overview. We have a video that we'd like you to watch. It features Dr. Todd Alec and Dr. Terry Allard, and these, of course, are our Northern Health physician leaders that do a lot of amazing work in the North. The video itself is about 13 minutes, but arguably probably some of the best 13 minutes we could spend together today to just help to consolidate some of the information that we've brought forward to you. And it really does tie together the things that we've talked about today, especially when you're looking at what you need to consider in regards to culture and how these things can be incorporated into the care that you're providing for the clients. So we're going to go ahead and show you that video. And I do apologize. Thank you, Candace. I pronounced Terry's name incorrectly. It's Aldred. Thank you so much. Okay, we'll show you the video now.
So as I play this, I'll just look for a thumbs up for people to ensure that they can hear it. If we have any issues, we can just send the link.
The best thing is to develop some rapport. So especially if you're working with Indigenous people, just say, hi, how are you? And maybe get to know a bit about them. Do they have a family? Where are they from? And that kind of will just ease them. And so when you start asking some pretty personal questions, they're more likely to respond to you and feel more comfortable to be able to answer those questions.
For us, our culture is very important because there's a level of respect the medicines we make, the foods we eat, how we teach. It's all a level of respect and how we bring it about and teach a younger generation to keep those cultural practices going. We do a lot of berry picking, we do a lot of canning, preserving our foods for the winter times through drying and through freezing. And so summer times is really our harvest time when we're busy out in the bush picking medicines, berries, and then we do a lot of fishing. We do our fish several ways, like, you know, we can them, we dry them, we half dry them, and we, and same with when we have a moose, we do the same thing, we can them and dry them and then half dry and then freeze a lot of it. Fish out of a jar compared to a piece of pizza out of a frozen box. You know, that's a healthier choice. Traditionally, it's been going on for years and years and years, as far as I can remember. From being young, my grandmother did it, and on both sides, and my mom and my aunties.
The dialogue is generally very story-based, so people like to really share their story with you.
So just to really sit back and let them talk for three minutes or 5 minutes to kind of talk about what they're concerned about.
When I get into the habit of just kind of rapid fire questioning to kind of get either information to support or go against my hypothesis, you know, it tends to shut down the interview.
Some people are just straight up front and they'll tell you what's happening and you deal with it. But some people, you can kind of see something's happening, so you kind of have to prod on it.
A sensitive question or something that they may have any embarrassment about or they're very nervous about, they usually will bring it up last. So they may bring up something much more benign, like, oh, I'm here for a blood pressure check, and you know, something like that, before they get to, you know, I'm having, you know, I've been noticing I have blood in my stool.
In some cases, you just have to really watch out when you're just about to leave the door and they bring something up. That might be the crucial moment where they're going to tell you something that they've been having a hard time disclosing, and so that might be the big issue that they didn't want to talk to you initially about, but found the courage to just before you left.
Our voice has been silenced for so long, it's really hard for people. And it's really hard to people, like, you know, you always say, oh, we're all born equal, you know, why don't you people just get over it? But that's not true, because after 5 generations of not being heard and being herded, it's really hard for people to stand up and get what they need, especially like out of healthcare, out of education, a lot of the different things where you see where we're hurting. We've always been told, you know, where we fit in, and we ourselves don't sort of demand that. The control of our healthcare and education.
As a medical professional, you need to bring out plain English. Speak to them on terms that they will understand. Because if you use high-tech medical technology words, they're not going to understand. And they can go back to their family saying, I don't know what the doctor said, but he said I had this, and I think it's a deadly disease.
In the context of working with First Nations people, that comes with an onus to be very self-reflective over our own cultural values and biases, which we all have. And so it's not like a shaming the practitioner thing, it's just being aware that sometimes we'll all treat people with less respect than they deserve just because of our human nature. But it's about being mindful when that happens, like thinking about the times, like when did one encounter with a First Nations person go really well, and what was the dynamic there, you know, as a reflective exercise versus, you know, an encounter that didn't go well. When it comes to reciprocity, so First Nations people historically, and I feel like it goes on, is that money was never really a thing. So it was all about trade, and that includes trades of knowledge and healing and that sort of thing when it comes to sharing gifts or services, I guess. Having people come in and do all this work is not that they're not grateful, but there's often becomes this like separation because they feel, you know, they often may feel like they're not giving anything back, that they're not doing anything. And so it sours the relationship, or at least doesn't allow it to flourish. And so often when I tell people is go out to the local communities, like go to the band office, introduce yourself. You know, you don't have to be pushy about it, but most First Nation communities like that I've lived in and that I've worked with are usually very, very open and generous with people who are genuinely interested. And so that allows them to feel like they're doing their part of reciprocity. So they're so you're meeting them where they're at, and they're able to build relationship with you, you know, in their strength when there's not that power differential. Also, community gatherings like health fairs, things like that are also great places to help forge that that feeling of reciprocity.
The trust thing is a big one for the doctors. Like, they need to trust our people. We don't just go to the doctors just for the sake of going to the doctors. We mean business when we go to the doctor.
If you want trust, if you want to build trust with anybody, go to their community events and go speak with the people and be there with the people, and that way you have everything in place for them, and the trust is there, and they know they can go to you.
I guess if they have time, they could come to community events if they want.
Relationship is something that does take time. So a lot of people have kind of program burnout. So a lot of people don't even want to go to anything that's labeled a program anymore, like a diabetes program or a women's program, because they know there's an expiration date. When funding runs out or when the people move on, the program's going to end. And so there's kind of this still mistrust with things. And so just being present, being there, being consistent over the long haul builds that trust. And you get to know the families and the dynamics, and that will help things a lot, because people then you kind of already know a background, so people don't have to necessarily tell you all the things because you kind of have that knowledge, and that's helpful, because oftentimes, you know, with a population that, you know, has a history of being heavily traumatized, having to relive that with every new practitioner is hard. And there's no way to kind of get around that. I think if you're working with anybody, these are important, because there's First Nations people everywhere, but is something called the ABCs. So thinking about Aboriginality, barriers, and colonization. So essentially gaining an understanding of what it means to be an Aboriginal person or an Indigenous person, which is the term we prefer in Canada. And so that means that we have, like, most Indigenous cultures, although vastly different, have very common threads. And so some of the common threads are the fact that we do believe in a creator and a Mother Earth, and that the combination of the two has what gave us everything we have. That the spirit that we're all connected. So you treat everybody with respect and integrity, because if you're harming other people, you're actually just harming yourself. If you're harming the earth, you're harming yourself. If you're harming our four-legged friends, you're harming yourself. So it's this idea that, you know, be the best person you can be so that you minimize the harm that you do to yourself.
For me, I'm a little non-trusting person to give my life story, but I need to learn a person's personality, whether it's a doctor or a nurse or whoever. I'm more prone to honesty. For me, I need to spend a lot of time. I mean, they don't need to, or I don't need to pour out my life stories all the time. I mean, it'll take time, you know, to build that trust, you know, boundaries, whatever you want to call it, you know, because you can't just jump in and say, okay, I will, you know, trust who you are, because I've been hurt by that, I've been betrayed by that, so it'll take time for me.
Or provide service for Indigenous people, particularly First Nations. It's nice to understand some of the services they have provided. So they have a non-insured health benefits drug list that shows all the drugs that are covered for First Nation people. So when I'm talking to a First Nation patient, I review it and see which medication, because sometimes they're only covered for 5 milligrams of a drug as opposed to 2.5. So you have to just really know which drugs are covered to. So when you prescribe it, that they're going to be actually covered. And if not, are they going to pay for it if they want to do that, or are there other alternative options? So that's a great thing to kind of look at.
People may have a vastly different socioeconomic background than you do, so they may not have a vehicle, and that may be something they won't share with you because they're embarrassed, or they may not have the gas money, even if they do, to come and see you. Understanding what are the barriers that the people you're seeing face. It's very, very important to understand the history, because if you don't understand where we came from, it's going to be really hard to understand what you see now. So understanding residential schools and what had happened to some of the people who went through that, and then the multi-generational effects of that. You know, when people are engaged in medicine that they believe in, that ties them to their culture and their traditions, it makes them stronger. You know, there's very few drugs now that are completely incompatible with any sort of herbal remedies, or a lot of herbal remedies. It can be married. So if people want to engage in both, I don't think it has to be an either or. And you know, if you're not sure based on if they're on very complicated or sensitive Western medical therapies, there's great pharmacists that work in the hospitals and some in the community that, you know, this is their expertise. That go and look at all the nuances of how maybe certain herbal remedies may affect their Western therapies.
The medicine we use is blessed by the person that picks it.
I'm using traditional medicines, like I probably have arthritis and I always use it all the time.
If they totally believe that that medicine is going to work on them, and it's between them and the Creator, again, to start with that belief work.
You know, when people are engaged in medicine that they believe in, that ties them to their culture and their traditions, it makes them stronger. And that can only lead to positive outcomes.
Such a powerful video that, especially having, you know, your colleagues, Terry Aldred and Todd Alec, you know, share those viewpoints, and having the people from communities speak about what's important to them is just so powerful. So hold that tight as you move, you know, beyond this session, and think about, you know, those voices that you heard here today. What would those voices tell you when you're seeing your next patient, maybe from community or a remote area? I'll hand it back to Donna to start us off on this slide, and we have a little exercise for you as well.
Thanks, Ryan. So yeah, that was a great video, and the graphic that you see on the screen right now, sorry, I guess it might be a little bit blurry as well. This graphic actually is taken from the Respectful Relationships curriculum that will be coming to Northern Health employees and physicians as soon as it's gone through a pilot process. And there may be some of you on the call today who were involved in the pilot and actually have gone through that curriculum. So this graphic may be familiar to you. I think it's important to, because the video I think really brought all of this information that's on this little graphic really together very well. And I think it's important to always be remembering that when we talk about a culturally safe environment, a cultural safe environment is really an outcome. And in order for that to occur, there's a role between the practitioner and the client. And for us as practitioners, it's about that real critical self-reflection and this learning journey that we're on, and that learning and humility journey that we're on. And for the client, it's really about being able to assess the experience. And so for many Indigenous people, unfortunately, the direction of care that they've received in the past tends to be more to the left. They've been in situations that were very diminishing, demeaning, and disempowering. And what we want to see is for all of us taking this education and gaining these new understandings, is that we can look at how can we move our care delivery and move this commitment more to the right, where Indigenous people, when they receive care in the health system, are feeling recognized, they're feeling respected, they're feeling that reciprocity, and not that power over situation, but that really good reciprocity that can occur between the clinician and the client, and that their rights have been taken into consideration throughout the process. So something for everyone to maybe start thinking about within our own cultural commitments to ourselves is maybe just over even say the next 3 days. Think about what you could do to say move the care that you deliver so it sits to the right of the continuum in regards to the practice that you do every day.
Thanks, Donna. And yeah, after watching that video, like I say, it's so powerful. And maybe you've noticed successes in your own practice. I have noticed a lot of our physicians and physician leaders do a really amazing work every day. So think about how these opportunities and these experiences come about and what you've done, and take time to celebrate them. Even the smallest step is a positive one. And so I have a little activity for you, a little ask. Not many people are on camera, so we'll work on the honor system on this one. But pull out your phone. Everyone has one of these. I have two within an arm's reach right now. So pull that out. And most phones have a notes app or a texting app or something. What we're looking for is just somewhere you can jot down a note. So the ask here is that, what can you do? Now, be explicit, be detailed. What can you do to move toward the right on this continuum that you see in your practice and in the spheres that you live in and work in and lead within? What can you do to move even the slightest bit to the right? That's where the change happens. So make a note to yourself. Give 30 seconds, just jot something down quickly. Maybe a few examples. Maybe you'll go into one of the maps that we've shared. Candace is going to send those out, I believe, with the evaluation for today. Explore community, maybe find a contact, reach out, introduce yourself, and start that reciprocity. Like I say, we all hold such incredible power in our circles and we don't even realize it. Another example, maybe you'll learn a greeting in a language. That contact information for nations and individuals will come in handy here. One example I'll share is in Prince George, a local elder that works with a lot of the teams encourages them to say hadi, means hello in the Dakel language. And this shared a valuable lesson with all of us. And the lesson there was based on the fact that we're all a little bit apprehensive to speak Dakel because we don't know any other words. But the benefit here is not just the greeting. Even if people don't understand the word, they'll understand the intent. The benefit here is that you and I and everyone else on this call and all the people that we're connected with, like I always go back to, we hold incredible power. And by speaking language in our facilities and our circles, it tells people it's okay to speak the language in our facilities. It's okay to practice culture in our facilities. And it really affirms people's identity. And that's really powerful. It wasn't long ago that people weren't able to practice and speak their languages and their cultures. And we all have a part in saying that that's okay. And that's okay here. It's safe to do. It's safe to ask to incorporate pieces of your culture in the care that we provide. And here's I'll share another just a good thinking exercise. Now, all of this change in all of us, it's all reflective. And we're all busy, physicians likely more so. But when you're seeing patients, no matter the environment, use that minute or two in between to think about how it might be different for somebody who may be Indigenous or different for somebody who may be from a remote area. If you just saw a non-Indigenous person, think about how that might be different for an Indigenous person. Imagine yourself in the hospital, say you're checking in on somebody with a complex tunneling wound, Think about the discharge planning, how that would be different if they're from a remote area that maybe has no pharmacy, no wound care supplies. How would you engage with that community and the providers that may be there to support that person long term? Another example, if you're caring for a senior who, say, recently had a total hip replacement, how would your encounters and your approach be different if that person went to residential school? Maybe you would ask permission before entering their personal space or using their personal space, such as placing items on their bed as they're in the hospital. And maybe you'd really just first start by listening and building that relationship before going straight to intervention. Right to you, Donna.
Thanks, Ryan. I think we had a slide before this, Ryan. We just wanted to take an opportunity, I think, to allow for some questions, thoughts, and reflections. So what's our time like? We've got about 10 minutes left. So I think this is a really good time for people to, if they want to unmute, if they have any questions, or just even sharing some thoughts or some reflections about maybe some care situations you've been in with your colleagues would be great.
No, I really appreciate this. I'm just going to keep muting and unmuting myself. Surprise. I really appreciate it. And I think that video was so poignant. And just even understanding, I remember, I'm a pediatrician, and I remember a father telling me some devastating news just as he was walking out the door. And it was exactly as she described. It started with something so benign and ended as he was turning the doorknob and telling me something so devastating. So I think having that in my mind now is so important and will make me a better pediatrician as I move forward. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I mean, that's really powerful information. We're all in these situations, and it can be so helpful to share them with our colleagues, because this is real hard stuff that we do every day.
And I'll just add, do some more digging into that and reflect on it, because between the time that you started that relationship with that family to the time that they touched the door handle, you did something to build that relationship to the point that they were comfortable sharing with you. So dig into what that is. Perhaps circle that back to Candace, and she can share with the group, maybe, if you're comfortable with that. I think it'd be powerful just to think about what was done there to make that person comfortable with sharing that news with you. Excellent example. Thank you.
Yeah.
Ton, were you going to say something?
Hi, I'm Ton Dingwall. I'm a physiotherapist on Haida Gwaii. I think just today, one of the things that happened just today was that so I see people for all types of injuries, and I often have people, saying I was thinking that I could use this natural medicine or something to put on it, and for a long time, I was like, oh, I'm not supposed to tell you what you can put on this, but I do have some traditional knowledge, not because I am Haida, but because I was born and raised here. And so today I was just like, and so I just, threw out a couple of options in terms of, I was like, yeah, you could use this type of thing or this type of thing or this type of thing, or anything else that you have or that that somebody, would be able to get for you, right? And so it was nice to see that piece in the video, because it's something that I just kind of intuitively gave up on not doing, even though it's not technically in my traditional scope of practice. So that was all.
Thanks for
It's a-
sharing that.
Yeah, it's an excellent example, right, of how we use that power I talked about earlier. We use that power to do good and create space for people to incorporate those practices right alongside what we do in the Western system, right? Excellent example. Thank you.
Yeah. And it was showing respect, which was great, which is really great.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Celine. Sorry, I don't have my video on. My dog is actually sitting on my lap. So I will not share that. I don't know why she's so clingy this morning, but in any case, I just want to tie on to what Tone said there. I found it very helpful. As a physician, I still feel I have a responsibility on what I advise my patients, to ingest or to take. And myself, I do not have all this knowledge on, what is traditional wellness and what do patients like to take from a traditional wellness point of view. So it was very enlightening for me listening to that presentation and looking at that video that we actually do have clinical pharmacology or pharmacologies around that can help us navigate that. If it is such an important thing for treating our patients, I think as a physician, that shouldn't be necessarily a stumbling block for us. Even though we don't have the training in all of those traditional medicines, we do have resources that we can tap into to make sure, it doesn't interact with whatever we prescribe to our patient, or that it is safe to take, or whatever the situation might be. So I found that very helpful.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. That's great.
I could share something from Haudegwai from a physician perspective. So it's actually fairly imperative to have worked here for a long time. It's been closer to 25 years now that I've been here. When the population base is so mixed, i.e., like it's about a 50-50 mix. So it isn't like a 2 to 3% of folks that you're going to come in contact with. So if you're not kind of doing some work in the area, you probably won't last long, because here at least, because the Haida is a very, very strong culture, and it's really in your face. It's everywhere. It's not something you read about or see on TV. It's kind of living, and there's like traditional language speakers, and there's kind of art everywhere. So I think our team here has really taken it to heart and tried to do what it's can. We've had elders teaching Haida language here. They've created curriculum for healthcare practitioners. We have a totem pole that we commissioned, fundraised for, and raised in ceremony, kind of as a follow-up for the grand opening that the province did in 2016. It felt a bit hollow and kind of like, we had a minister fly in and open it and then fly away the same day, and it really felt a bit weird. And then 2018, when we raised the pole, it felt like to us the true kind of grounding in place of our facility. So, I'm mentioning a few different efforts, but there's lots of little things, just the one-on-one. We all have a responsibility. I think I agree with Ryan and Donna to just make a connection. And to me, I think that's the most important, is that every one of us providing care shows respect, and that's all it is curiosity, respect, not having assumptions, asking a few things, maybe saying a few Haida words. That helps a lot as well, especially for the elders. So yeah, there's a lot that can be done. We're looking at a kind of a storyboard style thing. We're going to be using our facility engagement dollars for the physicians in the room might know what that is, to create like a who we are kind of welcoming sort of panel, sort of museum style, with pictures about the nature of care we provide and our supporters, and so that as a way of welcoming folks into the facility. There's a lot of barriers for any of us, including First Nations, to go into a facility. There's already, you had a wait ahead of you. So if we can lower those barriers to seek care and to feel welcomed in a facility, and to feel that it's a healing space, as opposed to you go there in pain and you advocate for yourself, and you kind of negotiate through waiting rooms and impressing upon a nurse how important your symptoms are, like sort of flipping it so that we're welcoming. is kind of like the hope there.
Thank you for sharing that. I think you guys are sharing some really rich information here. And I'm just wondering, like, do you have any way of, as a physician group, where people could just do that, openly share experiences and things that are happening for them? Because I think it helps other people learn as well. You know, it's I think really helpful to other clinicians. And I don't know if you guys have anything like that, but it might be something you want to consider.
I mean, it's a lot of it's about time and how do we collate that? I mean, it is a good story, but we don't want to be virtue signaling as well. I mean, it's kind of like, you know, if somebody wants to come and learn, you know, we did have Kathy Ulbrich and, you know, Dean of Medicine and some ministers, et cetera, come for our opening and saw, you know, this sort of very precious experience occur. You know, I guess it's forums like this that we can share. But you're right. I mean, I think there's lessons that we've learned here that could be useful elsewhere. But it's time, you know, to collate that and represent that in a appealing way that isn't going to be, you know, some thick document that's going to end up on somebody's shelf, right?
Yeah,
So,
no, you don't want that. You want something that's real, something that people can, you know, other clinicians can learn from, just from the sharing piece of it. So I'll leave that for you guys, but just a thought, because I think you're sharing some really good, important information today.
yeah, and kudos to Northern Health for taking this on. You know, I think in the in plain sight report and the aftermath of that, I think we've had numerous organizations look at that, take it to heart individually and as organizations to reflect on what can be done. We had the signing of UNDRIP by the provincial government, and I think it was 2020. So, you know, the entire province is moving in this direction. So, you know, the system as well as individuals are doing what they can to meet the calls to action of the TRC, I hope. But it's slow and it's multi-generational to undo that. You know, it's generations to get us where we are now, and it's going to be generations before we, you know, truly resolve some of these things.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a journey.
I got to run. So nice to see you all. Take care.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so
Right.
much, Donna and Ryan. We really appreciate the presentation, and we have it recorded. And I have the recording if anybody wants to review it.
I just wanted to end the presentation just by sharing with you just a couple of words in a couple of different Indigenous languages with you in saying thank you for having us today. So the first one is Marseille, which is Michif for the Métis people, and Miigwech, which is also thank you by the Ojibwe people. So thank you for having us today.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Have a great day, everybody.
Take care.